Hey everybody, what's going on? Eric here. Hope everyone's doing well out there. And we're back with the RC Green Machine. Yeah, that's what I'm going to call it, the Green Machine. And I got to tell you that out of the box, it says that it is ready to race or ready to run. I beg to differ with that. There are some setup things you're going to have to do on this thing. One of them being learning how to do a wheel alignment. Yeah. So let's take the cover off this thing and get into it a little bit. First thing you have to do when you get this thing outside and ready to go is break the sheen off of these back tires. You got to get these tires hot. So you hold up the back end a little bit and hit the throttle and let the tires kind of wear themselves out a little bit to get them a little bit sticky. That way it holds the pavement a lot better. Because this thing has a get up and go on it that yeah, you would see the speed on this car on some of the more higher price range cars. I got to tell you that yeah, and I had one that was an $800 car that well, the electronics of it was $800, $880. Let's put it that way. That was one that had to be built from the ground up, painted and everything else, and was no toy. And I gotta say, I thought that was fast. Yeah, this thing is pretty good comparison with it. All right, so what I did with this thing out of the box is I changed the stance of it as far as the ride height goes by adding and removing these little clips that go on top of the shocks. Okay, you got these little clips. They kind of pull the spring down, slide them in. They're a little bit of a pain in the ass. The more thinner they are, the more flimsy they are to put in. So that's the first thing that I did. And I got the ass end tighter than what the front end is, okay? And right now, the front end still is a little bit more loose than the back, but the back's nice and tight. The reason why I wanted those tires to stick to the ground, I wanted the body to kind of stay at a certain level so it didn't drop down when the torque hit. The back end is fine. I had no problems with that as far as the shocks go. Now, I've been watching a few videos here and there on this car, and people are having problems with the car wanting to drift off to one side or the other every time they take off, you know, from the stop. And they're adjusting the ride height on each spring to compensate for that. I haven't had to do that. The one thing that I did do is there is a slip clutch inside of here, and I tightened up the slip clutch because I don't want to have any slip. And I got some pebbles inside of here, and yeah, you get this out of there. Yeah, asphalt. Nice, huh? Where's the ashtray at? So I tightened up the slip clutch basically as much as I can adjust it as possible. It says in the book that when you take this cover off, you want the nut should be even with the shaft that is inside there. Well, I tested that out. That's too much slip, and I didn't like it, so I ended up tightening it up the maximum it can go. Now the front end of this thing is a different story. So you got your battery in. I forgot my two batteries today. Got them both. One's charging right now. This one was already charged up. Got it plugged in. You have to turn your remote on, which I just did, and then turn your car on. Now you're going to hear a little bit of a fan noise, and that's the cooling fan that's on top of the speed control. Now they tell you to adjust your steering center, so you want to make sure that the little arrow is center with the arrow that's on the bottom of there. It's okay, fine. So that's done. With some of these cars, you'll see that the tires are kind of turned a little bit. The car is not going to go straight. So what you'll end up having to do is compensate with the remote control. That's not the right way of doing it. Set the remote control to where the trim is centered, and your tires have to be, your front suspension has to be adjusted. So what I ended up doing is I had to readjust my ride height in the front because, number one, starting to wear through the body a little bit where the paint is, which is not a big deal. I have some new rims and tires coming that are a little bit thinner than what these are. Hopefully they're a little bit thinner than what these are. And so that'll end up changing with that. But the stance of this thing, if you go too high with it, the tire doesn't line up in the fender right, and it looks weird, looks funny. If you go too low with it, well, now you're scraping the front end. You know, every time the front end comes off the ground, it goes back to the ground, it starts scraping up a lot. So you're going to have to compensate and find a compromise with these guys. All right, so the front end, how do you do the alignment on this thing? All right, well, once you have the trim on the remote set to where both points are pointing to each other, you'll find out where exactly your tires are. So what you do is you take the wrench and say if they're kind of off or whatever, you adjust your toe and get them pretty close to where it's got to be. And basically it's the smaller part of the wrench right here, and you just adjust, turn it until it goes into the spot you want it. Take a ruler and then measure of what you got over here. So it's approximately about 10 inches across from the outside of the tire to the outside of the tire, and then go on this side and do the same thing. And again, it's approximately 10 inches across, so I'm within where it's supposed to be. So both tires are even with each other. And if you notice while you're driving the car and you start seeing tread being removed off the tires, one tire may be still a little bit out more than the other, so you want to kind of adjust that and look for it. Now, another thing is the camber of the tire and stuff. So I had to find something that's kind of like a straight edge, like a square. So this has got a flat bottom and a flat edge. So I put that on the flat bottom and stick it up against the flat edge, and adjust the top control arm to where the two are touching each side of the top and the bottom of this. And again, I go into the other side and do the same thing. So I know I'm pretty much square in the front end. I don't have to worry about that. And if you change the ride height in the front and the back, that's also going to change your geometry of your front end. So you want to make sure that that is all set up and good. Another thing is that this thing will take off, all right, and I will show that in the video. So you have 3 settings for your rear wheelie bar. Now, it was set all the way at the bottom, and it really didn't give me any lift on the front as far as the way it would come up. So I have it set on the 3rd setting. I probably should set it to the 2nd setting, because right now this thing really comes off the ground. And I gotta say, this car does fly. I had it was an $880 kit that I built from scratch back in I want to say 93, somewhere around there. Electronics, everything, whole car had to be built from the ground up, and I went with racing, high performance racing electronics and shit. I thought that car was fast, and I really thought that that thing was on some type of super boost or whatever you want to call it. This thing here, I think, outdoes that car. And I've been watching some videos, people changing out the transmission, people changing out the motors on this thing. This does not have posi traction, where both tires are exactly the same. Both sides are independent. So if one side has a little bit more weight on it than the other side, one side's going to slip a little bit different, just like on a regular car. Turning a corner on something that doesn't have posi traction, ground is wet, you hear one tire slip. And that's kind of what this does too. But I have to say, when driving it, I have not noticed the car shifting from one side to the other. As far as off of a dead stop, and a lot of people were adjusting their shocks in order to compensate. Now, I don't know the geometry as far as that goes, how that works, as far as maybe adding a little bit more tighter on one side and the other so that tire sticks to the ground more than the other tire does. I don't know, but this thing has no problem like that. Like I said, all I had to do is just adjust my shocks to make it a little bit more stiffer back here, and then tighten up that clutch. Otherwise, everything else has been pretty good. I got my front end set up, so I'm gonna go outside and play with this thing.